The underpinnings were lackluster even for the hatch on which this was based, and it had an aerodynamic flaw that caused several fatalities at high speeds. Despite that, they made 3 generations of this car and produced 670,000. Do you find yourself wondering just how German car manufacturers have become so successful? Sure, they make great cars, but what they're even better at is turning a disaster into a success. Look at the 911, a car so inherently flawed and likely to lob you into a hedge that almost nobody else used the rear engine format. Porsche made it into a virtue. Mercedes made cars that rusted terribly in the early 2000s. That same thing killed Lancia. Mercedes, now stronger than ever. Audi itself emerged from the ashes of the R080, the car that bankrupted NSU. And then there is this car. Like the Scirocco and the Corrado that came before it, this coupe used the underpinnings of its Golf brother. This one though used the ones from the Mark IV, which was never really known for its dynamic prowess. As a result, its competitors like the Z3, the MX5, the Cayman, all handled better. Okay, so we've heard the negatives now. Let's get the roof down, take it out and try and find out why it was still so successful. Let's start off with the interior. Looking at it now, you wouldn't think much, but back in the day, an interior like this was really quite stunning. It was different to cars that came before it. These fantastic rotary controls there for the heating, the way the vents are shaped, and those little sort of circular bumps that are there on top of the dash. It's all simple and it's designed to reflect what also happens on the outside of the car. Quality is really good. It's got some really nice touches, like the cover for the radio there with the TT badges. Everything has the 8 little dots around it, from the steering wheel top to the bezels on the instruments to the covers for these, for the vents and the door handles. There's a whole design language going on here, which I think is really, really successful. Ergonomically as well, it's perfect. I think almost anyone can get comfortable in one of these. They're fairly snug, but as Chris, the owner, pointed out, thanks for bringing it down, Chris, there's a lot of elbow room in here, so it's not all bad. And obviously, with it being a convertible, then you have the added light and the beauty of driving open-topped in summer. The exterior, though, is where everything really gels with this. Now, it's supposed to come from the German Bauhaus movement, which is all about simplicity of design. So it's supposed to be all squares, triangles, and round and circles. And with this, you can see it's basically 3 circles. You've got the top of the car, the roof, 1 circle, and then the 2 wheel arches, one on either side, the other 2 circles. It looked absolutely incredible when it came out. Literally stopped traffic. You don't understand, because familiarity has bred sort of contempt in a way, I suppose, that we're so used to these, we just dismiss them. But when it first came out as a design study in '95, and VW announced that they would be making it, nobody believed that they would be making anything that looked like the concept car. And yet, when it came out, that's exactly what it looked like. The thing is, though, that it is also that incredible design that ended up causing one of Audi's bigger ever headaches. Because when these were released in '98, there was a spate of high-speed accidents on the autobahns, and turned out that the body shape meant that it had a lot more lift at the back than it should have, making it quite unstable, changing lanes at over 100, 110 miles an hour. Not so much of a problem for us in the UK, but It was something that they were forced to address that brought a lot of negative headlines. Being Audi though, rather than fall victim to it, they bit the bullet. I think the whole program cost them £500 million, and they basically re-engineered bits of the car. So the most obvious is that rear spoiler, which on the very early cars isn't there and actually makes them more prized if you can find one without it, but it helped to smooth out airflow, reduce lift. More importantly, they introduced a new traction control system, a stability system, ESP. You can see the button there for that. That had to be retrofitted on all the cars that had already been sold, and that's what cost them quite so much money. In order to add ESP to the existing cars, they actually had to change the entire wiring loom of the car. So you can see why it ended up costing them so much. But in the end, they were able to overcome that obstacle, and it didn't hurt the reputation of the car. Now, there were a few versions of the TT. The one to have was the 225 horsepower 1.8 turbo engine. That came as standard with the Haldex four-wheel drive system. And that in itself led to some criticism because that is quite a front-biased four-wheel drive system, and reviewers and drivers at the time found that it made it a little bit uninspiring at the limit, especially if you add the changes that were made to the cars. I think there were also some changes to the geometry to make it more stable at speed. What will be interesting is to see how it feels right now. Let's just do a pull through the gears and then a snappy little drive through the little twisties. Now, full disclosure, this one has had a little bit of work, intake, exhaust, and chip. So it puts out more than the 225, puts out 275 horsepower. And it feels reasonably rapid, but certainly not overly so. Chassis rides pretty well, the suspension's completely standard, and it has an awful lot of grip. So even with this extra power, it really isn't troubled whatsoever. As a convertible, it seems to be quite well resolved as well, because although not as stiff as the coupe body shell, it's only on the bumpiest surfaces and under load that you can feel a bit of shimmy through the wheel. The gear change is nice and light, fairly snappy, and you can cover ground really, really quickly, but it does lack involvement. It's not particularly rewarding to drive fast. It's easy to drive fast because it kind of does everything for you. Now, the steering is a little bit nicer than I thought. I think perhaps now that we're used to the modern electric systems being so incredibly light and so incredibly numb, a system that at the time wasn't thought of as that great, it does load up, it does give you a little bit of information, and it feels okay. It's also got a nice rate of turning, so on that side quite satisfying. The suspension does a reasonable job of keeping everything in check, but if you start to go a step beyond that, it does move quite a lot. It has a lot of vertical movement. You can tell it's not designed to be an out and out sports car. The brakes do a pretty acceptable job on the road, albeit they don't offer too much feedback. Seems to be the general story really, but to be fair to it, it feels like a very secure car. And when you go quickly through corners, I wasn't picking up a massive amount of understeer. I guess it's just the general attitude of the chassis. It doesn't feel that much like it's front end led. And if you let go of the throttle, it'll tuck back in a little bit, but there isn't much adjustment in there that you can make in that way. Certainly not in the way that's fun, and it doesn't feel hugely precise either. Now you can get them, there's loads of them around even for £1,000. I think to get a decent car, this one is really nice. You're looking at £3,000 or £4,000 really, but you get so much value, and I think the design hasn't particularly aged. It still looks incredible. So whether you want the coupe or the convertible, as a modern up-and-coming classic, they offer incredible value. So this has had its limitations, and I think that the Mark II was probably the least liked out of all of them. The Mark III was definitely sharper, and it has been a huge success for VW, but despite that, they have stopped making them, and they will not be replaced. So, in a sign of everything moving in the direction of crossovers, it looks like the new up-and-coming crowd of car buyers are no longer interested in sort of small convertibles or coupes. Therefore, the TT, which has been such a seminal part of Audi, is no more. It's just going to be a new breed of crossovers that replace cars like this. And despite its weaknesses, I think that it's a car to be celebrated. It was groundbreaking when it first came out. It looked like nothing else on the road, and Audi absolutely have to be applauded for that. They made a very futuristic car, you know, a beautiful piece of design. Some people tell me they don't think that they're actually good-looking cars. I don't understand that. I think they look great, whether in coupe form or convertible like this. Thank you very much to Chris for bringing it down, and to all of you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you for the next video. YouTube usually comes up with something that could be of interest for you, so if you are interested and you want to support the channel, please do click on the link. Thank you and see you soon.